Wouldn't it have been embarrassing to have that painting on the front porch? My daughter-in-law, Macy, remarked casually, as if she hadn't just sold my prized artwork on a flea market app without asking me. My mother created that colored pencil drawing of Gerber's for me while she was in the hospital, just before she passed away. It's one of the last memories I have of her. I know, but it's not like I can hang something so amateurish. It just looks too shabby. Do you really think you should be speaking to me like that, considering you're my daughter-in-law? I responded, trying to stand my ground, but Macy was unbothered, crossing her arms and staring me down. Think about your situation. We'll be the ones taking care of you in the future, right? This is that line we keep crossing. Does that give you the right to sell my belongings without asking? I'm your only son's wife. You should consider how much we're going to be responsible for you. Macy shot me one last look before strutting out the door, her designer shoes clicking against the floor. The next day, I'd be moving into a new house alone. Macy knew this and sold the painting to spite me. It wasn't the first time she and Henry, my son, had sold my things without permission. I was seething but resigned to the fact that the painting was gone for good, but I'll never forgive her for selling something that held such deep sentimental value. Macy and Henry, who was always doing her bidding, infuriated me. Tomorrow, when I move into my new house, I'll cut ties with them completely. My husband's son and his wife can have this old house. I am Amy, a 50-year-old housewife. For years, I've done all the housework while working part-time at a factory. I've looked after my family, including my husband, my only son, and for the last 3 years, my daughter-in-law, Macy, my mother, who raised me as a single parent, passed away 6 months ago, leaving me a large sum of money from her life insurance policy. I used that money to buy a small new house and decided to divorce my husband, with whom I've had a strained relationship for years. The day before I moved in, Macy sold my mother's painting without my consent. When I told my husband we were separating, he simply said, "Do whatever you want." After all the years we spent together, our relationship had grown cold. I don't think either of us is to blame. It just turned out this way. My son and his wife, who lived with us, were the ones most opposed to my leaving. Who's going to do the housework if you leave? Aren't you a housewife? I'm a civil servant. Like Henry, I'm not like you, who only works part-time. It's shocking to hear of a mother abandoning her family, they both complained as I packed. And why are you buying a house now, anyway? It's my mother's money, and I'll decide how it's spent. When the insurance money comes in, you should use it for the family. Buying a house just for yourself is a waste. She's right, you should have shared Grandma's insurance money with us. Henry's wife, obsessed with luxury brands, never lifts a finger around the house and spends all her time taking dance, yoga, English lessons, and other classes. My son, who's completely under her thumb, blamed me for everything. It was the last straw. The night I moved into my new house, my friend Jane, who lives nearby, invited me over for dinner. My husband's out drinking again, so I thought it'd be the perfect time. Thank you, I haven't even started unpacking yet. Jane's house is beautiful. She and her husband love dogs and designed their home to accommodate a large breed. 3 Dobermans were lounging quietly in the corner of the living room. As we ate the burgers Jane had made, I told her about Henry and Macy. "What's wrong with your daughter-in-law? And, I'm sorry, but your son's just as bad. Henry used to be more independent, but now he's completely under her control. I'm just exhausted." One of the dogs, a female Doberman named Hannah, approached and nuzzled my feet as if sensing my distress. Hannah's more affectionate than my son. "All our dogs are smart and well-behaved," Jane said. She used to be a dog trainer, and because she's so skilled with them, her 3 large dogs, while intimidating in appearance, are actually gentle and highly intelligent. They'd never harm anyone, but they'll certainly bark if Jane tells them to, especially if an uninvited guest shows up. I wish I had a dog as gentle as Hannah. Why don't you get one? I'd be happy to help train it. As of today, I'm finally free to do whatever I want in my new house, starting a new life. Isn't that right? I was thinking the same thing. At the end of the month, just as I was settling into my newfound independence, my son called with news. "Macy and I are moving to my parents' house next month." "Your parents' house? You mean Macy's parents' house?" "No, it's my mother's house. My home. You already live in your father's house." I was confused. Macy and I talked it over. We realized that my parents' house is actually my mother's house, not my father's, so we've decided to move into your place. No, my house isn't big enough for the three of us. There was no way I was going to let Henry and Macy take over and turn me into their personal maid. But there's space in one of the rooms where we can sleep. You can sleep in the living room corner, and we'll use that space as our bedroom. Are you out of your mind? You want me to sleep in the living room corner? I could feel the anger boiling inside me. We're coming, whether you like it or not. I'll start by sending over a few boxes. I'm not accepting them. Well, I'll figure something out. Either way, we're moving in, so get ready, Henry said before abruptly hanging up. This was a nightmare. The thought of Henry and Macy pushing me around and making me do all the housework was unbearable. I would not let that happen. The next day, I went to a family restaurant with Jane, hoping she could help me sort this out. I'm sorry, but your son and daughter-in-law are terrible, Jane said, sipping her latte. You can't let them move in. You need to say no, and mean it. But knowing those two, they might hire movers and show up anyway. I don't know how to handle this, I said, trying to wash down my frustration with a sip of jasmine tea. It was my favorite, but today it tasted bitter. It's tough to say no when they might arrive with movers. We need to be careful not to escalate things. We have to find a way to make them not want to come. I can't stand their behavior. Well, we could get my kids involved, Jane suggested with a sly smile. Your kids? Yes, Hannah, Sun, and Sky, my 3 Dobermans. Jane's dogs were like her children. They can bark, growl, and put on a good show on command. We could ask them to give Henry and Macy a scare. My son's been afraid of dogs since he was little. It's hard enough living with a son and daughter-in-law who would sell my mother's mementos without permission. We need to come up with something. Absolutely, we'll figure it out. You're not alone in this. I felt a wave of relief wash over me after our talk. But when I returned home, it was clear Henry and Macy were serious. 2 large cardboard boxes were stacked in front of my door. A note was attached. These are Henry's and my belongings. We thought you might refuse the courier, so we brought them ourselves. We're moving in next month, so please keep them inside. Macy. My shoulders slumped as I read the note. I had no choice but to drag the boxes inside. When I opened them, I found they were filled with personal items, Henry's imported watches and leather jackets, Macy's designer bags, clothes, and shoes. They had obviously left behind valuable things they knew I wouldn't dare throw out. What a low blow. How little they must think of me, to sell off my mother's paintings and dump their luggage here without asking. Jane's words from the family restaurant echoed in my mind. Well, we could ask my children for help. I've occasionally joined Jane on her dog walks. Since I settled in after the move, she often invites me along for a change of scenery. She's a great friend. Having her support means a lot to me. Why don't you sell their belongings? Jane had suggested. Macy would do the same if it were hers, wouldn't she? Yes, she even sold the painting my mother made for me. Moon, Jane's male Doberman, looked up at me from the end of the leash I was holding. By the way, why do your son and his wife want to live with you? They're both government employees and have plenty of money. Why don't they just live on their own? They don't like doing housework, especially Macy. She's always busy with classes, going out, or watching fashion and makeup videos. So you've been doing all the housework yourself? Yes, my husband never helped. Henry's always working late or traveling, and Macy's the same. I recalled a conversation between my son and his wife on the day I announced I was moving out. If you leave, who's going to do all the housework? Well, you could. No, definitely not. I want your mother to do it. Jane sighed in disgust when I told her about this. It wasn't until a week later that Macy started calling me repeatedly. After dozens of missed calls, I finally answered, annoyed. Your house is pretty small, right? Yes, I've told you that. Henry said he saw you with 3 big dogs, and I'm just wondering, could 3 dogs like that really live in a small house? It hit me then. Macy is terrified of dogs. Lots of people are, and Henry's one of them. Jane must have been with me when Henry saw us, but he was probably too distracted by the dogs to notice anything else. I told you it's a small house. If you're worried, why don't you come over and see for yourself? I will. I want to check out the inside of the house. Macy's voice wavered slightly, as if she was starting to doubt her assumptions about the place. Anyway, I'll be there this Sunday at 10 a.m., she said before abruptly hanging up. Okay. I hadn't expected this, but now I had a chance to turn the tables. On Sunday, Henry and Macy arrived as planned. You really came, I greeted them. Of course, you know this mess is all because you impulsively bought this house, Macy said. That's right, you should have just kept quiet and continued doing the housework like before, Henry added, as they took off their shoes and entered. Okay, here we go. I opened the living room door, barely containing my glee. Whoa. Ah. They screamed in unison at the sight of the two Dobermans, Moon and Sky, sitting calmly in the living room. What? Are you kidding me, Mother? These dogs. They're mine, aren't they adorable? Jane, the dog trainer over there, help me find them, I said, gesturing to Jane, who was sitting on the sofa with a smile. They're sweethearts because they're so well trained. Moon, Sky, why don't you say hello to our guests? Jane instructed. The dogs barked in unison, causing Macy to gasp and slump onto the nearest chair, her head in her hands. Is she really that afraid of dogs? Jane asked, amused. Oh, they're just being friendly. Don't worry, Moon and Sky just want to play. At Jane's command, the dogs trotted over to Henry and Macy, wagging their tails and raising their paws as if inviting them to join in the fun. Stop, oh no, I'm scared, Macy shrieked, her body trembling as she tried to fend off Moon's playful advances. I'm scared of dogs, she cried, finally losing her composure and bursting into tears, snot streaming from her nose. It was clear she was overwhelmed. Well, if you're planning to live here, you'll need to get along with these two, I said, feigning concern. Make them stop. Macy's perfectly applied makeup, which she had painstakingly learned from YouTube tutorials, was now a mess. Her mascara ran down her cheeks, and the glitter from her eyeshadow had smeared. Tears and snot had turned her high-end foundation into a soggy mess. With her face ruined, she'd have to take the train home like this. Hey, Mom, do something. Meanwhile, Henry, who had been nudged by the much larger Sky, lost his balance and fell on his backside, scooting away in panic. Sky, thinking it was a game, happily pounced on him. No, stop it. This dog is too big and scary. I glanced at Henry's jeans and noticed a dark stain spreading across his crotch. He was so terrified that he'd peed himself. How pathetic. Moon, Sky, come here. Jane decided it was time to intervene and called the dogs. Instantly, they left Henry and Macy alone and obediently returned to her side. Moon, Sky, down, she commanded, and the dogs immediately lay down at her feet. They really were well trained and intelligent. All these years, I've been working myself to the bone with my part-time job and housework, and you never once helped me. And now, when I finally decide to leave, you think you can just move in and take over? Do you think your mother is stupid? I finally let out the words I'd been holding back as my son and his wife stood there, tears streaming down their faces. I had left home because I was fed up with them. I was not their housekeeper. But, doesn't that mean you have to? Henry stammered. These dogs are better trained and much gentler than either of you, I replied. Henry and Macy looked deflated, their usual arrogance gone. A husband with a wet crotch and a wife with smeared makeup, they were a perfect match. You also sold off my precious belongings without my permission. I will never forgive you for selling my mother's painting. I let it all out in one breath, then glanced at Moon and Sky, who were lying calmly, before turning back to my son and his wife. This house, with two big dogs, isn't for us, Macy muttered. That's right, we'll give up on moving in. Just give us back the stuff we left here, and we'll go. They're still in the boxes in the next room. Take them and get out. As I pointed to the next room, Henry and Macy cautiously approached, giving the dogs a wide berth. But as they opened the door, whoa, they both screamed and fell back again. Sitting calmly beside the boxes was another Doberman, Hannah. Mom, please, get the boxes for us. I'm not doing that, you brought them here, so you can take them out. I peeked into the room and saw Hannah sitting there, her expression calm and serene. I can't go near a dog like that. Then you can leave your things behind. You mean I should just abandon them? My bags and Henry's watches are in that box. You sold my precious belongings without my permission. Remember, I didn't ask you to leave them behind. I'm telling you, take them with you. Macy glared at me for a moment, but then, perhaps realizing the gravity of the situation with the dogs, she lowered her gaze and sighed. Please, Mother, bring us the boxes. Macy had been mocking me, fully aware of how much that painting meant to me, yet she still allowed it to be sold. Well, I'm sorry about that, but... Just then, Jane approached. Hannah, how do we greet our guests? Immediately, Hannah sat down and let out a loud bark. No, stop it. Hannah's bark seemed to be the final straw. With Henry's jeans still wet and Macy's makeup smeared, they scrambled to the front door and hurried out of the house. Afterward, I sold all the personal belongings Henry and Macy had left behind to a pawn shop. Their items were surprisingly luxurious. Henry's watch was worth a considerable amount, and Macy's bag was high-end. The extravagance of their possessions left me stunned. Back at their new house, Macy was now responsible for all the household chores. My former husband was displeased with her efforts, constantly complaining about the food, the state of the house, and the laundry piling up. Macy, overwhelmed by the chores, had gained 10 kilograms from stress and frustration, which she directed at Henry. Mom, I'm at my limit. Macy started hitting me. She's constantly fighting with Dad. I want a divorce. One day, Henry called me, his voice weary. You chose your own wife. You'll have to handle it yourself. I had no intention of giving him advice. I was tired of dealing with them. Meanwhile, I bought a female Shiba Inu and asked Jane to train her. She's going to be a great dog, Jane said, smiling as she patted the head of the puppy I named Rio. Thank you for everything. I'm sorry for making the dogs play such an unpleasant role. Don't worry, hearing about your troubles upset me too, but from now on, you and Rio can enjoy a peaceful life together. Yes, from now on, I'll savor every moment of my new life. With a sense of renewed purpose, I gently picked up the puppy and smiled, ready to embrace this new chapter.